In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome to the Daily Memphian Tigers podcast. I'm Frank Bonner, the Tigers football beat writer, and I'm joined by my guy, John Martin, our college sports columnist. We're about to dive into some Memphis football as usual, but first, don't forget to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also listen to these episodes and read all about our Tigers coverage at dailymemphian.com. So, John, let's get into it. You've got a 7-1 Memphis football team. Just how are you feeling about how this season has been going?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just said like before the season started, you would have hoped best case scenario this team would be 7-1, right? Like because we thought Florida State was a good team when the season started, but they were top 10 in the country, so we assumed that would be an L. But I think we kind of assumed every other game would be a win. So I think through 8 games we thought they'd be 7-1, and they are 7-1. But unfortunately for them, they're, if it's possible, the wrong 7-1 in a weird way. I said on our show earlier this week that I would have rather them lost to MTSU than Navy. If you're telling me they're 7-1, I'd rather them have beaten Navy but lost to MTSU because now you're in a situation where, again, you know, you're just hoping and praying that you have some help from around the league with, you know, Army. I guess you're kind of down in North Texas there. And then, you know, Navy tripping up somehow. And obviously, you know, you control a little bit because you play Tulane, but you're 7-1, which is like in a vacuum good, but it's the wrong 7-1. And it's also a 7-1 that feels like survival as opposed to like road grading these inferior teams. You're just kind of like playing around and hanging around and barely kind of, I mean, it's taken fourth quarter heroics 2 straight weeks from Seth Hennigan to get here. So I think the context of the 7-1, you know, you kind of open up the hood a little bit and look underneath the hood, and it's really not all it seems to be.
Yeah, I don't know how many Memphis fans would agree with you on the MTSU loss. I think a lot of Memphis fans, I get what you're saying.
But yeah, like because you're like, you know, you at least would have a chance to be in the championship
non-conference,
game.
right?
Yeah.
So you would still be undefeated in the conference game.
And I mean, it would probably okay, yes, it probably eliminates you from the playoff, but you're eliminated from the playoff anyway right now. Like Boise's going to the playoff. So, you know, it really wouldn't have made much of a difference. But no, certainly I think a 7-1 record is nothing to sneeze at.
Last year we talked about how Memphis didn't need to win a certain way. They just needed to win the games.
Right.
Well, this year, coming into this year, you know, they had college football playoff possible aspirations or whatever. So are we in a year where Memphis is still in that mode, or do they need to win a certain way? I know you're saying that basically college football playoff is out the door, but mathematically it necessarily isn't. Yeah,
I like the question, and I think it's an interesting one because there were years where, you know, it took Memphis probably 2 or 3 seasons to win 7 games, right? Yeah. Like not too long ago. So that like I had to be fair historically, but those days are over, and you are now the most well-funded college team in the conference. You have the most NIL. You got these $250 million renovations coming to your stadium. You know, I mean, they got the facility. Like Memphis is better positioned than any team in its league to win. And obviously, I know Silverfield's contract I don't think he's the highest paid in the league. He's middle of the pack, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of the players, you come to Memphis and you're going to get paid more than any other team, you know, in the AAC. So I think when you take those things into consideration, there is more of a burden and a responsibility to do it in a convincing and dominant way. I mean, Mike Norvell did. Justin Fuente was doing it there at the end. You know, surviving and advancing is great when you're in the NCAA tournament. It doesn't exactly get people fired up to come to the games when you're surviving and advancing against North Texas and Charlotte.
But I'll tell you, like, we may disagree here, but if Memphis beat North Texas by 30 and then beat Charlotte by 40,
Yeah.
I think the fan outcome still would be what we have seen. Like,
I
don't blame
Yeah.
the fans on the fact that Memphis barely beat Charlotte.
Right.
Like, they're just not coming.
Yeah, they're not coming. And, that's mostly due to the fact that they feel like their season is over because they lost to Navy. That's like, there's like this sort of mindset, and it's probably true, that when you lose to Navy, you can't go to the playoff. Because like Memphis football, for whatever reason, it's just always been this way for as long as I've been here. Its run rate in terms of getting people to like the 40,000, 50,000 is so high. It's got to be like the best possible scenario, right? Like when you won't believe this, but in 2016, when they started, no, it was 2015. It was 2015. They started like 6-0, 7-0. Dude, they had back-to-back weeks of 55,000 people. Back-to-back weeks. They had Ole Miss, which some of that was helped by Ole Miss. And then they had Navy come in. Maybe it wasn't back-to-back. It was like back-to-back home games, right? So you had Ole Miss, who you beat. And then when they came back versus Navy on national television, they had 50,000 people there for Navy. But it took Memphis being 8-0, 7-0, or whatever they were at that time for people to really go all in on Memphis football that way. So it takes that. It takes people feeling like they have a chance to do something almost unthinkable to get that kind of support.
But I'll say this in terms of the conference championship, because I've been going back and forth with the league on the tiebreakers or whatever. I know last time we said that, who was it, Navy needed to lose to North Texas or whatever.
Yeah.
That's actually not true. They just need to lose, period. The head-to-head does not include common opponents. So it goes from head-to-head.
So the Notre Dame loss could matter or no?
It definitely would matter because it goes from head-to-head immediately to the college football playoff rankings. Okay. And so Navy losing to Notre Dame,
they're out.
If they were to lose to another conference team, those two losses, conference or non-conference, would matter.
But that's only if it's a three-way tie, or that's head-to-head.
So the head-to-head is first, right? And so, like it would have to be a three-way tie if it counts to Navy.
Because if it was just
Navy has the head-to-head.
Right, so they would get in over Memphis if it was just that.
Yeah, but in the scenario that we talked about with
like Tulane, Memphis.
With Tulane, if they all had like a three-way tie or whatever, then the head-to-head wouldn't matter because everybody would have beat everybody.
Exactly,
and then it would go to the college football playoff rankings. And in that scenario, Memphis.
Right. So you need Tulane to beat Navy, and then you need Memphis to beat Tulane. Like in that scenario,
right? Because then you still need Memphis to win out.
Exactly.
But I mean, that's the gimmick. But if, let's say Army, for instance, if Army were to lose to Notre Dame, and then Army loses to some other team, you would presume that Memphis would be higher in the rankings over Army because even though they didn't play each other, so they're still I mean, with college football, you never know.
No, you don't.
Right.
Except unless you're an Indiana football fan, in which case you do know.
Well, you know everything. Like if you're over there.
Yeah, I mean it's never been a better time. You got Signetti and you got Mike Woodson. I mean it's like the halcyon days for Indiana athletics right now.
And for anybody listening, this is what John does, right? He finds ways to bring up and poke the Indiana because he knows I'm an Indiana.
That's right. That's right.
This is what. No, I
mean I wish Signetti was I wish I had a school. I was an alma mater where Signetti was coaching. Man, he's awesome.
I mean, he's a fiery guy, I mean,
he's like, Google me.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Google me.
But this is a Tigers podcast, so let's go ahead.
All
and
right,
get back
we'll save that for another day.
I don't want folks coming breathing down my neck because I'm using this.
Google me, Natalie. We're gonna have Natalie do that.
Hey, well, you do what you do. But while we're talking about Memphis football, the offense, right? We talked about it last week. When the offense has their back against the wall, when they need to score a point, they do it. We saw it.
Yep.
They, Seth Hennigan in that drive, the big catch by Anthony Lanfear, and then the touchdown catch by Rock Taylor. But there has to be a fire lit under them before they really get it going. Yeah. Does that concern you? Or how much does it concern you?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't concern me. It frustrates me. It frustrates me is what I would say, because that is undeniably this season where Seth has been his best, where he actually looks like the player we were sort of promised he would be as a fourth-year starter, as the only fourth-year starter in America at the same school. He only looks like that when he's losing in the fourth quarter, and where it's like non-negotiable, right? Where I have to be amazing here to give my team a chance to win. And he did it against North Texas last weekend. He did it against Charlotte this past weekend, and he was great. He made every throw. He didn't get sped up. He looked composed. It was absolutely a dot he threw to Rock Taylor in the end zone there. I mean, an NFL throw, really. But it's like, why aren't you doing that in the first quarter? Why aren't you guys playing with that urgency in the first part of the game? Because if you did, you maybe wouldn't have to pull something out of your ass in the fourth quarter every week to win these games against these jabronis of the AAC, you know? And I don't know, and you would know better than me, is that a Seth thing? Is that a Tim Cramsey thing? Like, because they don't come out, and they did this against South Florida, right? They score the first 14 or whatever.
Yeah, two of the first 3 drives it was.
And then they just let off. And it's just like, why are you guys not able, because the talent gap is so significant that you could do that every single week really in this league, except maybe against, Tulane. That's going to be a little different. But like, you guys could jump out on these teams to a man, probably 21-0, 28-0, and it wouldn't even be a problem. But they don't play that way with that urgency until they're losing in the fourth quarter, and it mystifies me.
And I will say in that first half, right, because when it was 7-7 at halftime,
yes,
you're looking at that score like what the heck. And there were, depending on how you view it, anywhere from 6 to 10 points left on the board.
Yes.
You've got Tristan Vandenberg misses a field goal.
Right.
And then they go forward on 4th and 2, and Seth throws
yes,
that fourth and goal from the 2-yard line, essentially.
Right.
And Seth throws that pick, which if you kick the field goal there, it's 3 points. If you score the touchdown, it's 7.
Yep.
So they moved the ball
yep,
at a rate where there should have been more points on the board.
For sure.
The red zone execution was the biggest deal there.
Yeah, I mean it was a guessing game. It was a little bit of a mystery. It was like, we got to kick it. We're going to go for it. We're going to kick it. We're going to go for it. They go for it there in the second half on 4th and 3 maybe, just inside the 20 maybe.
Yeah.
It was actually deeper than that. It must have been like the 10-yard line, because it felt like at the time, why are they not kicking this? Like it was a chip shot field goal. I know he missed the one, but it would have been what, 27-yarder?
Something that was like
anybody should be able to.
College kicker should.
They make these on College game day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? With Nick Saban holding it. And then the second, in the second half, where they kick it, but you're at the 2-yard line. I'm like, well, I'll just go for it. But anyway, he made it. And they ended up trailing again. But I don't know. It just kind of felt like nobody really knew what the hell they were doing in that fourth quarter, from a decision-making standpoint.
Well, I'll say on the one you're talking about, the field goal that he made it, it's tough to make that decision to go for it when you've already failed on 2 conversions or 2 potential conversions inside the 10-yard line.
Yeah.
And at that time, if you don't make it then that's 3 drives.
That's 3.
So if he would have made it on one of those other 2, then the decision would have been different.
Yeah, but it's like, okay, let's say worse, because what you've done is you've sent a message to your kicker, right? You've sent a message to your kicker like what's my guy at Arizona State? Kenny Dillingham, right?
Oh, that message it's a little different than that. I mean, he came out and just said,
well,
anybody.
I mean, I know, but it's like effectively you're saying we don't trust you to make a chip shot. We don't trust you because we're going for it on 4th and whatever. I know it might have been a little windy. I don't remember exactly do you remember what the wind gusts were at that time? What direction they might have been blowing in from?
It was at a point where a college kicker should make it.
100%. And they said, okay, well, we don't think you can do it. And then you're gonna say, well, now we think you can do it. So come out here and make this one. I'm like, what are we doing? I would have rather lived with they couldn't stop Mario Anderson all day. I think he was back by this point. Yeah. So I would just say, go get me a yard against Charlotte and we can go up a touchdown and we can say F the BS, basically, rather than try to play around with this kicker psychological.
Yeah, but then on the situation we're talking, remember they got the ball at the 8-yard line to begin with and ran it with Mario. So to that point, to that point, Mario didn't get the yards.
He didn't get the 8, but I mean, all he had to get was 1 though. On the last one, it was the shortest get down in distance that they would have had to complete. And then they kick it. Again, they won the game, and so it didn't end up costing them. But I mean, there was a real world where they scored that, they kicked that field goal, and then you're losing because you give up that big play to Purdy.
Yeah, and honestly, so I'm not criticizing that field goal attempt as much as you are, because in that situation, you don't expect your defense especially the way that this defense has been playing this year for a lot of the season.
Right.
You don't expect them to give up a touchdown in 2 plays.
Right. And look, they took the lead. All I'm saying is, if you don't want to kick it from the 10-yard line or whatever it was, and now you want to kick it from the 2-yard line, are you really like? It just seems kind of outrageous to me. Like it's like how do you have a roster without a dependable kicker on it? You know, this is a program that has been like it's prided itself on special teams over the years, you know, so.
Yeah, I did. I had mentioned that just in conversation. As you look at the history of Memphis kickers, right?
Yes.
You know, Jake Elliott's and so on.
Riley Patterson.
And then all of a sudden.
Steven Gostkowski.
The last couple of years, the kicking situation.
It's been terrible. It's been a real blind spot for Silverfield, and I don't know why that is. I mean, it should be a pretty easy place to recruit to, you know, because of the history with kickers in the NFL, but it just seems like, you know, Costa was never the answer. He struggled from the very beginning of the season.
Yeah, but he wasn't a guy, like, it's not like he was just some average Joe coming in. Like, he was a guy who was supposed to be. So, like, they're getting kickers who are supposed to be what they say on paper. It just doesn't pan out.
Yeah, I mean.
And so, recruiting-wise, you're going after the guys that you think are good enough.
Right.
And then, you know, on Monday, he said they're looking at all options. I mean, between, you know.
But they doing tryouts?
No, they're not. They're not going
to.
They're within their roster, right?
Yeah.
Between Costa, Tristan, you know, Tanner Gillis pinch hitted for them last year. They're looking at that.
Year,
He even mentioned the freshman.
Wasn't Gillis actually decent by the end of last year? Like,
yeah, he was decent, but it's not his. It's not his main thing, and so you went and you thought you had a real, you know, a solid.
I thought Tristan kind of drilled the last one. I was like, what? We don't think he could have hit a 27-yarder? I mean, that would have been good from 40, the one he kicked at the end.
Yeah, but it wasn't good from 37 when you needed it to be.
I mean, here's my thing with that, bro. Kickers miss. They miss. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He gets, you know, how are you going to give the guy one shot, and if he misses it, he never gets to kick again?
Which is why I think from a psychological standpoint, it would have been good on that next drive.
What I'm saying.
On the next drive that he missed in the first half.
Yes.
Let him get his confidence back up.
I thought that was just handled grossly. I just thought that was handled grossly from a coaching standpoint of the kicker. And it's amazing because he comes out and he drills the most important one of the day to that point, you know. But there just seemed to be really just no rhyme or reason to how they were using him in that game. So I don't know.
Well, before we wrap it up and you and Parth can chop it up about basketball, looking at what's left, I mean, it's really just the Tulane game. I mean, you got UTSA and Rice, but I mean, UTSA was a disaster collapse against Tulsa. Like, my goodness.
Yeah. And Rice just fired his coach.
Yeah, mid-season. So, you know, that is what it is.
Yep.
Tulane is rolling.
Yeah.
Does Memphis have enough in his off? Like, when Memphis offense has to play well, they play well. They played well against North Texas.
That's right.
They played well at the end of the game against Charlotte.
Yep.
Will they be able to start out the gate playing well against Tulane? Because you have to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I mean, Rice was competitive with them 2 weeks ago, competitive enough, and then they ended up falling apart in the second half. But I think it was like a 10-7 game at the half, maybe. So point is like, that's a redshirt freshman quarterback. Like, he's not a 4-year starter. Like, that should be a game. He's really, really good. He's really, really good. That team is really freaking good. That coach is really freaking good. So I'm not saying, like, I'm not picking Tulane here. All I'm saying is that, or I'm not picking Memphis here. All I'm saying is that Memphis should be able to, with its embarrassment of riches from an experience standpoint and returner standpoint, to where they should absolutely be live there. I mean, they're not going to be favored, but, you know, I mean, it's probably going to be, you know, touchdown game, right, is my guess, like Tulane -7 maybe a little shorter, right? So you should be live in this game. And frankly, it's one Silverfield needs to get because he's not won a big conference game in a long time. I mean, the only one he's got is UCF before you got here, you know? I mean, everything else has been mediocre, supposed to win. You win the games you're supposed to win, you lose the games you're supposed to lose. Like, that's kind of just been the Silverfield experience, you know? It's time to win a game you're not supposed to win.
Yeah, no matter what happens with the championship game, right? 11-1 season with the possibility to go 12-1 in the bowl game, even if you miss the championship. That's nothing to hang your hat about.
No,
I mean,
that's a very freaking. I mean, that's an elite Memphis football season that is as unlucky as it ever gets because you're not playing for a championship. But we can blame who we blame for that? Oresco. We putting that on Oresco.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Pernetti. It wouldn't.
Yeah, it would be Oresco for adding Army. But yeah, there's no arguing that. I mean, because now, okay, yeah, you unfortunately lost a game you couldn't lose to Navy, but turned out Navy was better than everybody suspected. And then you finished the season with a win as an underdog on the road against a really freaking good Tulane team. If we're dealing with margins of error of one loss, I mean, it kind of is what it is, right? I mean, you can't expect a team to go undefeated. I never thought that was a possibility for Memphis. I don't think they should be held to that standard.
It shows progress of the program, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, hey, again, we won a big conference game. We handled business where we had to handle business outside the Navy game, and we punctuated it with a nice win on the road at Tulane. So, but then you go into an off season of great uncertainty, where I think Silverfield is going to be tested in a way he never has been here because he went from Brady White to and he did give Seth Hennigan the reins as a freshman, and it worked out. Is he going to do that again with Antoine Hill? Is he going to give Antoine Hill the reins as a freshman again and hope to strike gold twice in a row?
You still got Arrington Maiden here, who from a program standpoint, is going to be ahead of Antoine Hill in terms of his knowledge of the offense.
And I would think you also probably still hit the portal for a quarterback too. Like you bring another one in.
That's just what you do nowadays.
You'll lose one or two. I mean, guys will leave, so you have to be active in the portal. But yeah, I mean, it would be a great way to end the season if they can do it that way. There's no question about it, and it would undeniably be a very good season for Memphis football, even if it didn't unfortunately get the results you wanted.
Speaking of rosters and talent, I know how much you and Parth love to dive into Penny Hardaway's roster and everything. So I'll go ahead and kick it to our Memphis basketball beat writer Parth and let y'all chop it up.
Man, we're finally at that point where we've got actual basketball to discuss, more basketball to discuss than we do the off-the-court happenings and shenanigans. So we'll be getting into all of that and more today. But first, don't forget to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. You can also listen to these episodes and read all of our Tiger sports coverage at dailymemphian.com. Now let's jump right in. John, we got a second viewing of this Tigers basketball team against another, national title contender in Alabama on Monday in Huntsville. Kind of a mixed bag, right? Things looked really rough, then they didn't look so rough. What do you make of everything that we saw in 40 minutes of action on Monday from the Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, I was excited about these exhibitions because, they represented, two cracks at really, really good teams, but they ultimately didn't really materialize because, RJ Davis didn't play for North Carolina. I mean, they're a massively different team when he's off versus when he's on. He's one of the best, probably 5 players in college basketball.
No doubt.
And then Bama didn't play Grant Nelson. They also didn't play Wrightsell. And Youngblood's are obviously been out. So Grant Nelson was huge for them all year last year. Probably certainly their second best player, maybe more like a 1B than a 2. And Wrightsell is a guy that's going to, make a lot of shots and get a lot of things done too. And you didn't see either one of those guys. So I don't know, man. It was disappointing that you didn't get either one of those teams at close to full strength, and you still kind of got handled. I think that's where I'm at with it. Obviously Memphis decided to, they got together and said, hey, we're not going to have any foul outs. And so it made the game a joke, basically.
It wasn't a real basketball game.
Right. And so how on earth can I take anything out of it other than the fact that, Memphis was down 20 at the half? I mean, that feels like the most real thing from that game because the comeback never happens because PJ Haggerty's in foul trouble the whole game, right? And he's probably not on the court. So I don't know. I come away, disappointed in that the games weren't what I hoped they would be when they were scheduled.
and I come away disappointed that they weren't really all that competitive, even in that context.
Yeah, I mean, when Bama was trying, Memphis kind of got punched on, right? Like just out the gate. You saw even when they were letting threes fly, which we all expected, but even when the threes were going in, they were collecting their own rebounds again and again and again, and Memphis just couldn't do anything about it. It seemed like early on. And you're right, that comeback maybe doesn't happen. Or likely doesn't happen, right? If there's fouls, if there's foul outs, rather. PJ Haggerty picked up his fourth, I think, with like 17, 16 minutes left still in the second half. So he would have been sitting at that point, certainly. And he picked up his fifth with 11 minutes still to go. So, I don't know how competitive that game looks if PJ is not on the floor, or how competitive that game looks if Nate Oates, quite frankly, didn't take his foot off the gas, which is what it seemed like late in that game. So it's hard to know what to make of it. And unfortunately, I feel like the most real thing we saw is the shooting, right? Because shooting is shooting, no matter who you're playing or where you're playing, or what kind of game you're playing, rather. And it looked kind of horrendous. They went one of 14 from three. Memphis did.
Yeah.
That's after a poor shooting performance against North Carolina. Penny says that these are anomalies, so I guess we gotta take his word for it for now. But it's hard to do that when you've seen it twice.
Yeah, I mean, what's going to change? I mean, they're going to just miraculously turn, Baraka Koji into a 39% shooter. I mean, I don't really know what you hope happens. I mean, they look like a team that has one real shooter on it, and Kobe Rogers, who's in a slump and will shoot better. But what do you got after that? I mean, PJ Carter can't play. PJ Haggerty is too busy, with the ball in his hands. Same for Tyrese Hunter. I mean, I just think that's probably the biggest negative that I have right now about the team, man, is that in an age where everything is sort of moving towards that, everybody's shooting more and more and more and more from the pro level on down. That's the way it works. Memphis just looks like a dinosaur out there. Like they just look like, and they're not really like good enough to have this sort of clashing style. Like it'd be one thing if they were just like committed to, everybody on the court 6'5", 6'6", and they're just going to guard you like no tomorrow.
Right.
But I don't really think that they're capable of that. So I don't know, man. I'm just kind of low on the team. I know people in Memphis will not like that, and they'll think I'm just always low. I'm not always low on the team. Like I usually come into the season excited about the team, and then I'm let down inevitably. But in this scenario, this is as low as I've felt about a Memphis team since Penny's first year.
Wow.
Like his first year, which wasn't really even his team. So this is like this is the lowest I've been on a Penny team since he got here, for sure.
I still think there's talent, and I've heard you say, and other people say, not just you, that there's not, but the talent is still there. Like they can't shoot, sure, but like to say this is some kind of untalented roster. You got PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter, two guys that could play almost anywhere, right? At the top of your pecking order, surrounded by guys like Dane Deja, Musa Cisse, Baraka Okogie. So I think you've got pieces.
It's not talented relative to the other rosters that Penny has brought in.
Relative to last year? Yeah, no.
It's relative to the year before that. I mean, the year before that, they had Kendrick Davis, DeAndre Williams,
and a bunch of role players, and a bunch of mid-major role players, right?
Yeah, I mean, after that, but your top two was like elite. Your top two was elite.
Yeah.
And you had the best player in the league in Kendrick Davis, and the year before that, they had Amani Bates, Jalen Duren, Earl Timberlake, etc. I mean, this is Penny Hardaway's by far his least talented team. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be his worst team. As we know, those two things are not always don't always run parallel, talent and results. So maybe that streak will continue. Lower talent, I should say. Maybe the results can be better. I don't know why they would be, but nothing that has happened in the Penny Hardaway era has really made that much sense. So let's just keep with that trend.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about 2 years ago where And DeAndre was great down the stretch. Obviously, DeAndre Williams was, but at times early in the season, it seemed like Memphis's best offense was giving the ball to Kendrick Davis and getting the hell out of the way. What's been one of the most discouraging things for me to see is it seems like Memphis's best offense this year might be giving the ball to PJ Haggerty and get the hell out of the way, which is not what the plan was really supposed to be, right? It was supposed to be more of a by committee effort and having different pieces and scoring from the inside and outside and everywhere on the floor. And it just seems like that's not going to really come to fruition. It's going to be, hey, PJ Haggerty, save us. And can he put that cape on? Like, is he capable of being that guy that carries this team when he needs to? I don't know.
I also don't think that everybody else is going to like be just cool with that.
Yeah,
that's the problem. It's like
we already had friction, right? Like the season hasn't even started yet, and there's already been
because you keep gassing everybody up. You keep gassing all these guys up, man. And I mean, I think you know, that was the beauty of Kendrick Davis. And there's a reason why that was Penny's most successful season, is because Kendrick comes in pedigree with the bona fides, and everybody knows what's up. Everybody knows, all right, he was brought in here to be the dude. He was brought in here to be our leading scorer, to be our primary ball handler. And the other part about that was that Kendrick was so humble about it too. He was like, yo, I know Penny. I love Penny. I know this program. Like I'm just saying, he didn't come in here like, this is my team and everybody needs to shut the hell up and do what I say. He was still like, you know, he was a good teammate, and that's why you win 26 games, and you're a bad bounce away from going to a Sweet 16 most likely. I do think we'll look back on that year as like that was the missed swing. It was just a 95 mile an hour fastball right over the middle of the plate. You know, it was a super meaty pitch. Memphis swung at it. They fouled. They tipped it, and it got caught in the outfield. You know, but you know, who knows? There's a whole season ahead, Parth, and maybe this will be a surprise.
Yeah. So we've kind of touched on the highlights or lowlights, if you will. But what does all this mean, right? Like, have your expectations changed for what you thought this team could be versus now you've seen them against North Carolina and Alabama? You know, granted, weakened North Carolina and Alabama, shorthanded. Both those teams were, but has your idea of what this season can be, what this team can be, changed at all after seeing this?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I'm lower on them than I was probably before I saw them. You know, because I hadn't seen them yet, and I mean, you just don't know exactly what's going to look like. Like, but it didn't. I mean, there's just no part of that offensive operation that gave me any kind of optimism. Right, that's the first thing. I didn't have super high hopes, but I was still, again, let down by it. I'm not really sure what they're running. I'm not really sure, like, you know, how it's gonna be successful in a game situation where they're gonna see a lot of zone defense, especially against good teams early on. Like, I just think it's gonna be really hard for them. Now, defensively, I was encouraged. I actually thought there were some things they showed they could fly around a little bit. You know, I'll buy that, but man, you know, it's hard to win games over the course of a season when your defense first, because you know these teams can score in college basketball in 2024, and I don't unfortunately really think Memphis is going to be able to do that most nights.
Yeah, Memphis's only offense seemed to be its defense, right? Like the only way they were scoring in that game was by junking things up and getting in your grill and making the game ugly. Like, can you do that for 40 minutes against the best teams in college basketball? I don't think so, but I guess
then by the way, stay out of foul trouble.
Well, yeah, while playing that physical style of basketball, absolutely. That's tough. So, I mean, it's a tough ask.
I think those are going to be the main questions for sure.
Look, I think it's still an NCAA tournament team just because of how bad the AAC is, right? That's first and foremost. I think even with some of the struggles they may have in this, you know, daunting non-conference slate, they're still far and away the most talented team in the American Athletic Conference. And I think they'll win the league and make the tournament. I think we saw a bubble team. I think we saw a 9 or 10 seed type basketball team, which is what I'm expecting. 8, 9, 10 seed kind of, you know, potentially having to maybe not win the AAC tournament to clinch their ticket to the tournament, to the NCAA tournament, but at least having to win a game or two, right? To feel safe on Selection Sunday is, I think, what we're going to get.
That feels correct. That feels right to me. I mean, I think that'd probably be their ceiling, 9-10 seed.
Ceiling. Wow. Okay.
I mean, based on what I've seen, man, I mean, I could be totally wrong, and they turn it on in the first few weeks, but I just think they're going to have a hard time in this non-conference, bro. Like at UNLV, at San Francisco, at Clemson, at Virginia, like.
Yep.
I'm not really convinced, man. I'm not convinced. And that's what you run into, man, when you flip the roster over and you don't really have any continuity. And like, it looks like that. It looks like you flipped over a roster and have no continuity, right? I mean, there's just nobody on that team besides Jourdain that was here a year ago. So it's an unideal situation. Maybe this is the year with the shortened rotation that Penny figures it out sooner than later. But I really do. I think he's got his work cut out for him, man. And if it does end up in a tournament, I'll say this: I think it was a really good coaching job by him.
Just to make the tournament would be a 2 thumbs up coaching job, is what you're saying?
I would say so.
Wow.
So. Yes.
Man, the bar is low then. I mean, right?
The bar is low. The bar is low, man. I mean, but just consider everything that this offseason has, included. I mean, staff, complete overhaul, players threatening to sit out with NIL. Who knows if he's the last. I mean, it just feels like there's a lot of negatives working against Penny with this roster. And that's why, I'm pretty confident that if he makes it, it'll be a good coaching job for sure.
So this thing officially starts Monday night, 7 p.m. inside FedEx Forum against Mizzou. Mizzou obviously did not win a single game in the SEC last season, went 0-18 in conference play. It also flipped its roster and reloaded via the transfer portal this offseason. How do you think the Tigers match up against a Missouri team that's talented but still outside the top 50 of KenPom?
Yeah, I don't know a ton. I don't know a ton about it really, other than Mark Mitchell, who came over from Duke, who I like actually a lot. I really liked him in his role with the Blue Devils last year, and I could absolutely see him being a 17, 18 point a night guy for them. I don't know a lot about the rest of it. But I will say this: I really love Dennis Gates. I think he's a good coach. I'm pretty shocked he went 0-18 last year in the SEC. Maybe he just had a bad combination like Memphis, right? Maybe he just had a bad combination of guys, and it just kind of manifested itself like that. But I'm high on. I mean, I think it's going to be a dogfight, man. I mean, I think Memphis will probably be a small favorite. Depending on what their mentality is, I could see him definitely getting the job done, but Missouri and that coach, man, they're going to be on a mission. They're going to be on a mission to get you back for what you did last year at Columbia. And so I think it's every bit going to be, a 1 possession game, with a minute left. It'll be a knockdown drag out. I mean, I think again, Memphis will be the favorite at home. It's very difficult to win here. We know that. But everybody's got to be, everybody's got to be ready for that team, because, they've probably been thinking about this all off season is getting their lick back with you at FedEx Forum.
Do you think if it does turn out that way, where it's a 1 possession game and Memphis ekes one out and the game's ugly and they win by 1, whatever, is that concerning to you?
No, I think it's a good win. I mean, I would be thrilled with it, because I think there's a decent chance, man, they just lose. And then you start your season 0-1, and then everybody's panicking and everybody's freaking out, and maybe rightfully so. So I think any win against Missouri, I mean, that's a top 52 team at KenPom.
Yep.
I mean, again, I think it's a good coach. they upgraded in the portal. It'd be a good win. 1-12, whatever. It'd be a really good win for Penny Hardaway if he can get it.
Yeah, no, I think the margin a victory, should they win, matters less than how it looks, right? Like the problems that we're talking about, whether it be shooting, turnovers, just no organization in the half court offensively, like stuff like that. Like, can they address those issues in less than a week's time? It's hard to say, and I guess we'll find out on Monday.
Yeah, exactly right. So should be fun. I'm looking forward to your coverage this year, man. Year 3 for you at Memphis.
Yes, sir. Season 3.
I'm hoping that this is the charm, my friend.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm hoping as well. I'd like to cover a little March Madness run. That'd be nice. All right, looks like that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us, John. You can read all my stories and all of John's columns at dailymemphian.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.